Chapter 9. "Ginger, you sprayed me with your wet fur," Adam sighed, looking down at his wet pants and shirt. Elle's dog shook her wet fur for a second time in a row, spraying Adam and covering him with water and a little mud. Elle hurried to grab 2 towels, one for Adam and one for Ginger and her mess. She was shivering from the rain, that's why I let her in the house. Elle and Adam had just got back to the ranch from the benefit gala. They had both changed into jeans and t-shirts to get more comfortable, but now it looked like at least one of them would need to change again. "Yeah, I know, but I thought dogs are supposed to be outside. Isn't that why they have all that thick fur?" Adam rubbed the muddy brown spots on his hands and dabbed at those on his shirt. "Well, when the outside weather gets chilly like this, she gets really cold. And I've sort of spoiled Ginger a little by letting her inside the house when she's cold." Elle shrugged. "I'll clean her up so she won't track dirt and mud everywhere." Elle carried the very muddy dog to the bathroom for a quick bath, thinking about the horrible way this evening had ended. She bit her lip as she remembered Alicia's awful words. Niggling seeds of doubt were planted. This may be a marriage of convenience, but what if Adam settled for second best? Was that why he married her? Maybe he hadn't told her the whole truth about why he married her when they were at the Royal Ascot horse race. Doubt and fear rose to the surface from a deep place as she thought about the impossible situation she was in. Now, more than ever, she believed her stepmother and Adam's ex-fiancé were right. She was the trashy poor girl next door whose unrefined ways would end up being a hindrance to Adam. Even tonight's argument about bringing the dog in the house proved that she didn't belong in his world. The problem was she didn't know what to do about it. She finished cleaning her dog and wiped away the last of her tears, determined not to let Adam see her heartache. Rubbing off the last of the muddy water splats on his face, Adam sighed and went to his bedroom to change. He hadn't wanted to begin their evening together by being impatient or sharp with Elle. The truth was that he loved dogs, but he was annoyed by the problems he had to deal with in his business. It was time to make things right with Elle. Adam walked back to the kitchen, only to find his wife sitting on the floor beside Ginger, pouring food into the dog dish. "Hey," he crouched beside her and put his hand on her shoulder. A thin line appeared between her brows as she studied him, hesitation in her green eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you. Forgive me?" "Sure." Elle got up. Adam took the bag of food from his wife and put it back in its place. Adam stood up and followed her to the pantry. He leaned his shoulder on the doorframe, watching Elle. He wasn't convinced all was well. "I'd like to start the evening over. Again, I'm sorry about snapping at you about the dog. This is your house now, too, and I want you to feel free to bring Ginger inside whenever you please." His brows puckered in concern as he watched her. Elle stared at him a few moments before she nodded. "I accept your apology and I forgive you. I'm sure we'll both need to be patient with each other as we adjust to being married and living in the same house." "I agree." A sigh of relief escaped Adam's lips. "Let's pretend all of that unpleasantness was from some disagreeable stranger who has now been banished from the kingdom." Adam gave her a half-smile as he fidgeted. The corners of her mouth quirked up. "What do you say to that?" "As long as you promise the gates are locked so that stranger can't get back in." Even though her gaze still looked a little sad, the corners of her eyes crinkled as she walked past him. "I promise." Adam sauntered behind her and reached for her hand. "Let's go somewhere where we can talk." "All right." Holding Elle's hand in his, Adam led the way into the large family room. Its 15-feet-high ceilings with large windows and wood fireplace made this room one of his favorites. Memories took hold as he sat down on the old leather couch. Elle curled one leg under the other beside him. "This room is my favorite in this ranch house." Adam got up and put some wood pieces in the fireplace and started a fire. "Why's that?" "There are so many good memories here. I still remember, like it was yesterday, my great-grandmother gliding back and forth in that rocking chair near the wood stove, She crocheted large warm socks for great-grandfather regularly. Adam looked around the room. Grand would watch the wood burn from his large chair that faced the fireplace and blow smoke circles from his pipe. I can still smell that sweet scent whenever I come into this room. Of course, that memory is always followed by memories of great-grandmother telling him to go outside with that thing. He grinned at her. Al giggled at the story. Sounds like your great-grandparents loved well and had a lot of grace for each other's quirks. Yes, they did. Listening to your mother talk about your father tonight seems like they were really close. That's a wonderful family legacy to have. It is. It was much the same with my parents before Mom died from cancer. They loved each other so much it was really difficult for my dad when she passed away. It was like there was this huge hole missing from our lives where she had been. Al's eyes swam with tears. Sorry, I don't mean to turn into a water faucet. Hey, you don't ever have to be sorry about missing those you love. Adam put his hand on hers, rubbing gently along the top of her knuckles. The simple gesture of his hand touching hers brought tingles of warmth that shot up his arm. Thanks for that. Al swallowed back emotions before she continued. Your mom and grandparents are so encouraging. It was great to see them tonight. They must be a big support to you and your brothers. Adam could tell Elle was trying to shift the conversation away from herself and the family she still missed. They are. We do what we can to cheer them on too, like tonight, when Mom shared her story. Doing that wasn't easy for her, but she got through it. Adam studied the flickering firelight for a moment before turning toward his wife. She was so courageous to share her story tonight. Your mom is an inspiration. Al hesitated and sighed. It must really be great to have a family that is always there to encourage you. I've missed that. Have your stepmother and Carly been there for you? A furrow formed on Adam's forehead as he questioned her. Sadly, my stepmother and stepsister have never supported me like that, but I'm okay because Joanna and Bella have been there for me. And now you have me and my family too. Adam intertwined his fingers with hers, loving the way her small fingers fit perfectly in his. Yes, that's true. There was an uncertainty in her reply that Adam didn't like much. He should have expected it, as he hadn't been around much in the past few days. Lately, I haven't really been the support you've needed. Adam leaned closer to Elle, picked up her hand and kissed it while his gaze held hers. I am truly sorry. She bobbed her head, unspeaking, her gaze holding his. I'm going to change my work schedule. I'm going to ask my team to manage what they can with the beta test of that software, and I'll use the rest of that time to work remotely from my office here at home. He would be happy to spend more time here, closer to Elle. I understand you're busy, but it would be nice having you here. Elle yawned and put her head back against the couch. I guess we're both going to get even busier with the renovation of the racetrack and training my new horse. Adam moved Elle closer to him and put his arm around her shoulders. She curled up against him and sighed. Yeah, it looks like it. I wish we could have more days that end with the two of us together like this, Adam. Elle closed her eyes and soon was fast asleep. Adam agreed. He kissed the top of her head and pulled her close, enjoying having her near. This time, as he thought about how he'd enjoyed their evening together, he didn't have a suffocating fear which normally accompanied that thought. He shifted a little and picked up his wife and carried her to her bedroom. Setting her down on the bed, he covered her with a blanket. Bending down, he kissed her forehead. A soft sigh escaped before she rolled over and went to sleep. When he reached the door, he stood there watching her for a few minutes, unsure of what was happening to him. Maybe those old fears didn't have such a pull on him anymore. Maybe the cold shell around his heart was beginning to melt. Al, could I ask for your opinion on this? Adam called her over to his large office. He was talking with the landscaped architect, and they were trying to figure out the best place for the new stables Adam was adding to the new racetrack renovation. Sure, what is it? I was just wondering about your thoughts on this. Should we increase the size of the grandstand? How many stalls should we build for this racetrack? Adam put his hand gently on the small of her back. Touching her unexpectedly was something Adam had started doing more of lately. She liked it a little too much. It would encourage more people from the community and surrounding communities to use the racetrack, so yes, I think it's a good idea. Elle did her best to focus only on the question. She appreciated the fact Adam asked her opinion on details that were important to him. We should also have a separate entrance to the racetrack and reserve the driveway to the ranch house for family and friends. Yes, good idea. Let's do that. They talked for a few more minutes before finalizing the plans. The landscape designer soon left to get his team ready to begin the next day. So the details are coming together for the racetrack then? Al leaned against his office desk, her gaze roaming over the design. Yes, it's looking good. I have a bunch of workers coming tomorrow to begin the work, so that's a good start. Adam ran a hand through his hair. Al had come to realize it was a nervous gesture when he was uncertain about how something would go. It'll be fine. The teams you've hired are professionals, and they'll do a good job. Al put her hand on his arm to try to settle his nerves. I guess you're right. No need to be concerned. Adam put his hand on hers, lifted it, and kissed the back of her hand. You're a big help. Do you know that? I'm not sure how, Al shrugged. You are able to bring calm even when the situation seems chaotic. That's not something I do very well, so I appreciate you helping me. Especially since it seems like all these renovations and designs need our attention all at the same time. Adam lifted her other hand and kissed the back of that one too. Elle could feel his soft lips on her skin and couldn't help but wish he was kissing her lips instead. Heat rose from her neck to her cheeks. A hazy memory of the night before came back. She had fallen asleep on his shoulder and woke up in her own bed. Somewhere in between, she thought she dreamed of Adam's kiss on her forehead, and of his gentle hands tucking the blanket around her. Well, I'm glad I could help. Reclaiming her hands, she slipped them into pockets of her jeans. She didn't know what she was more afraid of, that he was kissing her hands, or the fact that she was tempted to pull his head down to kiss his lips. Maybe you could help me a little too. Al was desperate to find a way to get her mind off of Adam's kisses. Sure. Well, at the benefit gala, your mom introduced me to a couple of women who are connecting me with more groups who would be interested in the horse therapy programs. That's great, Al. Yes, it is great, but it's more than I expected. In the last 2 days, I've had calls or text messages from 10 different crowds. Some are calling from groups with children with physical or mental disabilities, and some are organizations that are asking for horse therapy for children from poorer families. Then, I also have a couple of groups who are interested in horse therapy for teenagers and adults who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Elle started to walk back and forth across the room, trying to think it through. Well, it sounds like you have more people interested than you originally planned for. That's true. Al rubbed a hand on her forehead. So a couple of big questions I have now are how do I separate the different horse therapy sessions for each group, and then how do I find enough people to help me handle all of this? Here, let me try to map out possibilities. Sometimes it's helpful to see it drawn out. Adam sat down in the chair behind his desk and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. He sketched out a map to the Jennings ranch, focused on the barn and the large pasture. Here's an idea. If we divide this pasture area that's closest to the barn into 2 large areas, we can fence each one off and use it specifically for horse therapy programs. That looks good, but now we still have to plan how to fit each group into the week. Al walked over and stood beside Adam, looking over his shoulder. Well, that shouldn't be too difficult. Adam sketched out days of the week inside each of the 2 areas where the horse therapy programs would run. If you ran 2 programs side by side for 4 days a week, and you only did it in the afternoons, you would easily be able to find room for each of the groups. That's so good. Elle leaned down, her blonde ponytail slipping over her shoulder as she traced her finger along the drawings Adam made. Now I can see how to better handle requests from each group. The only problem is how to find all the workers I need to get this up and running. Any ideas? Actually, I do have ideas. I was thinking about the community around here. There are a few teenagers and adults regularly looking for work. If you set up a bunch of advertisements at the Paradise Lake Library, Community Center, and also on the local radio, you would have a few responses. And if you don't get enough emails or calls from that, it's simple enough to expand to the surrounding communities. Yes, most likely there are a few families in town who have teenagers looking for work. Elle sighed in relief as she looked down at the sketch Adam had made. She was grateful that now she had a bit of a roadmap to follow. It made getting the program started a little easier. Elle smiled. The good news is that I do have a few sponsors now, thanks to the people at your benefit gala. So that should help with the extra costs of hiring workers. I have set up this horse therapy program as a non-profit organization, so that should make things easier to get sponsors. And I would like to be one of your first sponsors. Oh, Adam, you really don't need to do that. Elle's protests fell on deaf ears. I want to contribute. What you're doing is helping a lot of people, and it's something I believe in. Adam reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a checkbook. With a flourish, he wrote it out and handed it to her. Here you go. Her eyes widened at the amount. It was $100,000. Now she could hire workers and fix up the riding area on the ranch. Elle had a little more than half of the money that Adam gave her sitting in her bank account. But she didn't want to use that unless absolutely necessary. The $200,000 had paid off the rest of the mortgage, but she really hoped to pay that back too. She intended to give it back to him, as she didn't like the idea of being the poor orphan girl that Adam felt sorry for. Thank you, Adam. Not only did you take the time out of your busy day to help me, but you also donated to this cause. I'm grateful. There had been very few people in her life that had cared enough to take extra time away from their busy lives to help her with things that were important to her. Her husband had even taken time away from his own deadline to offer advice and support. She felt appreciated. A new awareness swept her senses of how it must feel to have someone really care for her. Elle lowered her head, intent on kissing his cheek, but he surprised her when he turned his head and looked up at her. For a moment he paused, then his mouth closed possessively over hers, searing his name onto her heart. Placing one hand behind her head and the other on her waist, he moved his chair back and slid her onto his lap. Adam, Elle started to protest, but any unwillingness on her part dissolved as his arms wrapped protectively around her. He kissed her with a fierce tenderness, shaping and fitting her lips with his own. Elle, you're so beautiful and perfect just the way you are. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. He explored the soft recesses of her mouth until she shuddered with a sensation she had never known. Elle's heart took in his words like a sponge, soaking in words she'd longed to hear all her life. She wanted desperately to believe them. Consuming kisses followed, and Elle felt like she was on fire. Never had she felt so willing to receive Adam's kisses. When she was younger, there had been little time for puppy love. Later on, there wasn't any man she cared for enough to date. When it came to kissing and men, she was quite the innocent girl. These sensations Adam awakened in her had been dormant for far too long. Her heart was awakening to love, and she didn't know how to put a stop to it. An insistent scratching at the office door filled the silence. Adam's impatient groan pulled Elle out of a heady stupor of kisses. It's Ginger. I think she needs to go out. Elle pushed lightly against his chest and stood to her feet at the dog's loud whining. Next time, I'm going to make sure all dogs, cats, or any other animals are far away from us. Adam stood and walked toward the door. Heat rose up her neck to her cheeks as he mentioned a next time for his kisses. She wouldn't know how to withstand his advances as her heart still beat wildly in her chest and her legs felt like rubber. And yes, there will be a next time, I promise. Adam turned his darkened gaze to her one last time before he opened the door.